to the Bean Ninjas podcast, where you get an all-access pass to see what happens behind the closed doors of a fast-growing global bookkeeping and financial reporting business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bean Ninjas podcast. I'm talking with an old friend of mine, Kate Walsh Rose, today. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Hi, Mez. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I think you've got a really interesting story. We haven't had anyone come on the show that's done exactly what you're doing, which is you have a role as an operations manager at a construction company, but then you've also started a side hustle within that company. So I'd love you to talk through maybe to give us a sense of would you describe the construction business as a medium-sized business, something to get maybe a number of employees, something like that, to get a sense of the size of that business. And then maybe you could talk through your mindset around it. Why did you want to start the side hustle, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. I think the construction business is probably tipping from medium to almost large now. When I started, it was definitely a small business. It's just on 80 employees and in a couple of different states. So that's been a great learning curve because I've been here during that growth period and that journey as well. In terms of the side business, that's probably, we've known each other for quite some time, Mez and, or Meryl, I should say. And
no one knows my nickname on the
podcast. sorry, everyone. And I think you've certainly inspired that side hustle. Obviously, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week book was, certainly talks about that, and The Barefoot Investor as well. They're two books that I probably started my journey in that space. And the challenge for anyone is transitioning from your full-time employment or whatever you've got going on and being financially viable to kick yourself off into that side hustle. And also from a time perspective as well. And so through multiple chats with yourself and other people that I respect and probably have a bit of a mentorship with, I started seeing gaps in the current clients with their construction. So the construction business works from anywhere from $0 to $6 million worth of work in particular sectors: aged care, health and education. But what we were seeing from the construction side is poorly maintained assets. And it's certainly something I've done in previous roles where I've done facility maintenance and managing the maintenance of assets. And we were really lucky to have some strong trade teams that were directly employed in the construction business. So, I started talking about that we could have another offering that for the clients and fill a gap there, but also about cash flow as well. Preventative maintenance is more planned, and it's a monthly revenue stream, which I know is something that you've spoken about with your business. And so I was looking to create that for a construction business, which is usually you incur those costs up front. You even have to put in bank guarantees, so you've got cash in escrow, then you've got to incur the costs up front, and you might be, up to 120 days delayed in payment. So you actually got a quite significant financial constraints in that. Whereas preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance, it should be a lot quicker turnaround. So that's, I think, where the conversation started with the directors of the construction business. One in particular encouraged me to go away and develop a pitch and a business case, and I did that. Probably stressed about it a bit too much and made it a lot more complicated than it needed to be. And I actually think I did this, finalised it when I was hanging out with you on the Gold Coast, and you simplified it, helped me simplify it, and it was certainly received well by the directors and voted on, and also voted on by the head plumber who holds the licence. So that got across the line, and not only did that, but I was lucky enough to get a little stake in that. So I have investment in it as well.
Great. So there's already so many gems in that, and I can remember helping with the pitch. It was a while ago now. One of the questions I think if other people were in a similar situation where they're an employee in a business and they're wanting to work on something, a side hustle, they're wanting to start a business, but they might have some constraints either around the time that they have to work on it or cash flow. I think this is a great way to solve it. And actually, it's very clever. In this situation, you've identified a problem within an industry and potentially a way to add value to a business model. You talked about recurring revenue, which is quite different to how the construction industry seems to work. And then we're able to bring that to your set of directors. And I think maybe not all directors would be as open-minded as it sounds like yours were, to encourage you to come up with an idea in a business case and pitch to them. And then it sounds like they've also enabled you to have a stake in that business. So was there some groundwork that you needed to do, or if you were trying to help someone else in a similar situation to get their directors on board with them starting a side hustle within the business, what would be your advice to them?
I think knowing the directors personally, it was part of that journey as well, and what their motivations for running the business are and continue to be, and understanding the challenges that they were facing. Business owners take on significant risk in their personal lives. Some of them, have to put personal assets up to run businesses. And so that conversation and the trust between myself and the directors, I knew that they were, not struggling in that space at all, but that was something we could talk about and thrash out over time. So my advice would be to understand the challenges that they might be facing and the business is facing, but also to have that non-business communication as pathway. So, when I'm at work and during business hours, I definitely have my work hat on in my role and around my accountabilities.
I've seen you at work. You're a machine pumping out work and being efficient.
Try to be, as are you. I think we're pretty similar in that space. But when the bell sort of rings, if you like, or when the work is done for the day, we have quite a great transition to, whether it be around the table tennis table or over a beer, or, whether we're going to a social occasion as well. We have the ability to drop that and talk openly and honestly and, pitch ideas to each other that might just be fleeting. Quite regularly, I think yesterday I saw an article in the Financial Review and just was in the space to in my thinking time to be able to sort of go, hey, we know people that own buildings and somebody else is trying to do this. So what would it look like if we did this? And it was a complete concept. But, we spent 5 minutes just chatting about that, and nothing will probably eventuate from that chat. But it's just about pitching and in your thoughts around different concepts that might come up to you because you're looking at it in a different angle. So the thinking time is important, the communication is important, and then going away and doing almost a feasibility study. But also the lesson I learned was to not make it too complex. And I definitely didn't pitch to get any return out of that to start with. I hoped, as you always do, but I'm exceptionally lucky with the people that I work with, that they are just amazing people that always give merit where merit's due, and was lucky in that space.
So let's talk through the next part of the story, and I'm actually going to circle back to ask you about thinking time later, because I think that's a really interesting topic in itself. So remind me if I don't circle back to that. But we'll come back to the story. So you delivered the pitch, you got the directors all approved it, and then what happened next? What was the timeline to get the business or the sub-business, Rex Plumbing, off the ground?
Well, you'll love this. This was very quick. So the pitch was, you don't have to do a thing. That's all on me. I'll run it. And logistically, my role is quite significant in terms of aspects within the construction business. Look after HR, IT, day-to-day resourcing for site, and also for procurement as well. Have an amazing team under me that, look after that, but that hasn't always been the case. So we looked at it from a small business or a startup type, where I would get 1 day a week to do the plumbing business, so Rex Plumbing, which I have made Wednesdays So the first protocol was to write out the plan of what I needed. So I needed a website, I needed branding, I needed, all the business stuff like your business name, which I hadn't even had at that point in time. I didn't think of anything. I, just decided that my strongest trade team was plumbing, and that was the one we were going to go and start with. So I wrote that list or project plan and started actioning it. And I think we had the branding within a week, we had the website up within 2, and the pricing model within that website as well. And probably a week later, so within 3 weeks, we had all our branding material, and we had a client, one specific client that we were happy to share across the 2 businesses. And as much as I'd pitched it that the current clients had a gap, we decided we wanted to keep it quite separate. It was then about learning business development, which was a completely new area for me. I think I'd reached out to a couple of people in different industries, and the BNI network sort of popped up. I'd actually referred a friend to another business owner, and they said, come along and have a look at this BNI networking group. And 3 weeks later, I joined that group, and that created instant clients for us. I think that doesn't work for everyone depending on your category or your business industry, but trades tend to do quite well out of our network and from what I hear across BNI networks as well.
I actually started with BNI too. When I started Beanages, that was one of the first things I did to try and generate leads. And I found it really valuable from just learning how to give referrals or how to make introductions and how to think about who might be valuable for someone else. And their motto is something like "give as gain" or something. It's something like that, but it's all about giving.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
And it's a bit of a different mindset. They're great skills to have. And I think often they would sit outside of a traditional operations manager's skill set, business development and sales. And so how did you find that? When you built those relationships, and then did you have to close a deal, or what did those first few sales look like?
I think the first few sales for us looked like, could we solve a problem for someone, and could we solve the problem in a different way that another plumber could do it? For us, we have a really heavy focus on customer service and transparency. So it was about meeting the expectations of the referral, whether that was a domestic or a commercial client. And we were lucky that we had a big enough team that we could get there quickly. We could solve the issue in all aspects. And there's so many different areas of plumbing. And we have plumbers already onboarded that knew the safe ways to do the work. And so we were able to up and run very quickly. I have customer service skills. I've done previous roles doing that. So that was an easy transition. What we found in terms of a challenge was we very quickly found out the types of work that we did not want to do. One, and not so much from a cost perspective or a profit perspective, but more so for what was time intensive from an administration or a customer service, or the technicians would sort of be going, well, I've done everything that I can do. It's actually about educating the client. So specifically, roof leaks are a common thing that happen in Melbourne. They might not happen at their mess, but they certainly happen down here. And you can spot fix a roof leak, but you really, when your roof starts leaking, it's probably time to replace the whole roof. However, that's a huge expense upfront, or generally speaking, and the spot fix often doesn't fix the whole problem. You'll end up with water will get into its weakest link, and unless you go around with silicone everywhere, which is just not possible, you often end up with a callback, oh no, my roof's leaking again. It can be a completely different spot, but most clients link the two together. So we've had some challenges around that. We try and educate our clients. We're still happy to do roof leaks, but it's about educating the clients to say, okay, this is exactly what we've done. This is the exact location that we've worked on. We have also assessed the roof, and in doing so, we've highlighted that there's, either one, it's time to replace the whole roof or a section of the roof. If you don't do something, you are going to get more leaks, which is never well received. to be honest.
And so how far along are you with Rex now? And have you had any challenges as that business has grown in balancing your time between the two? Because I imagine as Rex grows, it will require more of, potentially might require more of your time as well, or be throwing out more problems at you to solve. So how do you manage to balance that?
That's a really good question. And yes, you're absolutely right. It does, as it grows, it throws more challenges. Managing the time, I'm pretty good at. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Ex-swimmer, everybody, ex-swimmer.
Yes, there's certain things that I know for me, I need to get into a routine. So, yeah, I have a very specific routine, and I've had to learn when that routine doesn't happen for various reasons to work around that. So that part of managing my time is associated to that. And the other one is sticking to the Wednesday wherever possible. So I'm pretty stringent on that. I've implemented a couple of different products and applications that have really helped manage my time and make time more efficient. We use a system called Simpro to manage our work orders. Our team also does their scheduling through that, and we also do our timesheeting through that. So that's been really positive on managing the work that we do. We're actually probably only using 40% of that capabilities at the moment, because the interesting thing is that technicians or trades technicians are absolutely amazing at what they do on a daily basis, but administrative tasks are the last thing on their minds. So when it comes to time cards or purchase orders or expense receipts or things like that, that's been a significant challenge and probably always will be. So we're looking at different ways to maximise efficiency and accuracy on that data for us, but whilst also understanding that it's not their forte. That's probably why they're in trades. And two, if they're spending time on that, I'm actually not making money on them. I'm being very blunt.
Yeah. Well, and actually, while we're on the topic of efficiency, because I know it's a pet topic of ours that we talk about together, what are some of the things that you implement just as a manager? So not necessarily across just Rex, but in your role across both businesses. What are some of the things you do to optimize maybe the interactions that you have with staff, or how you block your time, or anything else that you've found is working for you at the moment around getting the most out of each day?
I have a very structured meeting, which we'll probably chat about later, in terms of got this out of a book called Traction, and also a mixture of B&I. So there are a couple of things that I've taken away from that book and the B&I networking group is it's quite structured and quite timed. So I held an operations meeting once a week, which crosses across to the both businesses. It's a 90-minute meeting. It's very prepared. It goes against a scorecard, so each person has a scorecard that's related to their accountabilities and responsibilities. And we've set goals for that scorecard. So it could be, the amount that we've invoiced for Rex each week. We know what our budget is. We know the target we want to hit. And obviously there's a cyclical nature of that. So sometimes we'll miss it. Sometimes we'll be well above it. But we can track week to week and see hopefully more green than red in that space. So everyone in my team has that and has a scorecard, including myself. We also then have an issues list. So to come to that meeting, you have to see if you have any issues or challenges that you might be facing in completing your tasks. You need to put that on the issues list, and I prioritise them before we enter the meeting. And then we work our way through each of those. We only allow an hour in the meeting to do that. Sometimes we don't have any issues, so the meeting's quite short. It's just about our scorecards and keeping everyone on track to the strategic goals that we've set ourselves as well. And then if we do have those challenges or issues, we talk them through and we solve them then in the room, or if they're too big for that room, we create a workshop around that with only the people that are required in that workshop to make the decision to solve the issue. So that's one we've implemented that since the beginning of the year, and that's worked extremely well for the team. And then the other one, because I do manage a face-to-face team, is to make sure that I'm giving them time. I have a one-to-one, and that's come from the BNI networking. So each member in my team has a half an hour one-to-one meeting every week just with me, and it doesn't necessarily have to be around work. It can just be checking in with them as well, in terms of their challenges and personal and work, and also if there's approvals that they might require from me or things that are outside of for example, putting in a new phone system and I needed to discuss who was getting what extension number. We can tick that off, and we tick it off in the meeting, but we've only got half an hour to do that. A couple of other things that we've used is we use Rike to manage all of our tasks, so I can also jump in and see what my team's working on, and they can do the same for me. And I have just implemented Calendly to manage all my scheduling, and I've set up particular times that I'm happy to meet people depending on what I'm meeting them for. So I just send them the link that's relevant to that event, and that's been actually, I'd say, probably stop the emailing back and forth of, what time can you meet, what time can I meet, whereas I've just sort of said, here's when I'm available for this particular meeting, and people click on that link and they also get a text message the day before to remind them as well. So that's been really positive, and I think has saved a lot of time, albeit pushed a few things out a couple of weeks that may not have done so, because I can sometimes be quite reactive, but it's been good for me to have that happen.
Yeah. We're big fans of the book Traction that you mentioned as well at Ninjas, and we actually have a future podcast episode. It's still in the pipeline, but down the track we're recording an episode on some of our learnings around implementing Traction in our business. So it's good that you touched on that. And just one other quick question related to this topic: how do you manage interruptions? Because I know with a face-to-face office and with a demanding role like an operations manager role, a lot of people are competing for your attention, whether it's your team or whether it's directors. And I think you touched on that with Calendly. That helps with scheduling. Is there anything else you do to help with or help manage interruptions?
Yes. When I first started, I took the door off my office so that I had an open door policy, and I very quickly realised that was ineffective, because I guess there's a couple of different books that I've read and have a lot of understanding around how the brain works. Every time you're interrupted, it takes you, at least 20 minutes to get back to what you were doing and in the same headspace. So put the door back on is one. Two, I've trained my team and I've spoken to them about and given them the resources so that they understand that every time they're interrupted as well, that there is that time period to get back to what they were doing, which is inefficient. So there's been that education piece that I think has been important. But I also take time out of the office, probably I would say once a fortnight, where it's at least half an hour out of the office to really just knuckle down and get something done, and use a timer that sort of gives me that space to get it done in as well. I think it's called a Pomodoro timer.
Yes. So now we're moving into the finances part of the podcast. And so I had a couple of questions related to this. I guess the first one is that you're a Ninjas client and you've tested out a couple of different products of ours. And I think you've really embraced the concept of building your own financial knowledge. I've really seen you take ownership that that's a valuable piece of information or tool in your toolkit. And so I wondered if you could share just a couple of thoughts about why you might think that it's important to build skills in the area of finances.
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't mention in my pitch, and probably why I got over the line, is this building a business and running one is the quickest way to learn. And I think from a professional development point of view, one of the directors in particular probably saw that and probably that gap in my skill set a little bit. And I also didn't have the confidence in that space. I could manage a budget, no problem, but when it came to sort of understanding accrual accounting or, looking at the management report and being able to pick things out that were not quite right, I really struggled with that. And I think that's something that you and I have spoken about, but also that your team has really worked on developing, particularly with your non-core products, or they may be core products now, but in terms of your finance education piece, you're working with Xero, making sure that was set up as well, and then the CFO or the virtual CFO and piece that I've been working on with Wayne. So they're critical for my development in that and being able to understand how the business operates. I'm very good at looking at something logistically and in terms of a process and minimising that, but actually grasping that in a dollars and cents piece has been a real learning curve as well.
Well, you were one of the star students in the financial literacy course, so good on you for doing the homework and embracing all of the knowledge and applying it. It was great to see that. So a related question, and this is something that we're asking everyone on the podcast now, is what's your definition of financial freedom?
It's a tricky one because I think it depends on your stage of life, to be honest. At one point in time, I would have said so that I can go and travel and see the world and get those experiences. I've been lucky enough in the business that we sponsor Edmund Rice Foundation of Australia, and I was lucky enough to go and visit Kenya and see the slums over there, and that's really impacted how I see the world, although I probably had a little bit of this as well. And I think financial freedom for me is about being able to give back to your community as well as living, within your means, and that may change and evolve over time. But I think if you can give back to other people, there's a real sense of gratitude and joy for your life, and whatever challenges you're having don't seem so bad as well. And I think also, my wife and I are trying to have children and wanting to embark on that, and passing those values to them is important. And financial literacy in all aspects of life, personal and business, gives you that, whether it's understanding that you get this much money for your allowance per week means you can spend this much on lollies and this much on books and this much in your savings account for when you're old enough to buy a car, all those types of things.
Okay, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been really fun chatting with you, and appreciate you being a great student as part of the financial literacy course. A wonderful customer at Bean Ninjas. We really enjoy working with you and collaborating with you on your financials. And also thanks for, I'd say it's more than 10 years now of friendship. Want to upgrade your financial skills and learn how to use Xero better? Applications are now open for our Financial Literacy for Xero Users training course, designed for non-accountants who want to better understand and manage small business finances. Here's what Hayden, one of our past students, shared about his experience.
I guess one of the biggest challenges I've found with our business predominantly being e-commerce is that as soon as money comes in, it goes straight back out to invest in inventory and other expenses that are involved in having a product-based business. So cash flow is always a significant issue. I basically realised that I wasn't checking financial documents regularly enough, so didn't really have as good understanding of where we were financially on a regular basis, and wasn't keeping up to date. Checking the bank accounts occasionally wasn't enough, really. And when you go in and check the financial statements, you really get a better understanding of where your business is positioned financially. The course really gave us a better understanding of the different elements of the cash flow and financials, and really made it to be a great course. It's really great now to have all the tools and templates that I need to go back and have a look at. I've got them saved away, which is fantastic, and go back through and review them at any stage when we need them, which is often required as we grow.
So if you're someone who gets overwhelmed with the idea of going into your Xero file and not knowing what's going on money-wise with your business, and you just want a simple way to understand Xero and finances for your peace of mind, head to beanninjas.com/course to learn more about our financial literacy course and apply today. That's Bean Ninjas, BEANNINJAS.com/course.